Today I'm going to do a demo on doing something called trace monotype. And in this process, I'm going to ink up the slab and literally just lay my paper on top and then lightly kind of draw with a pencil on the back, and it will pick up the ink from the slab and transfer to the paper. Now, because the ink is kind of laying on your plexiglass plate that has ink on it, it's kind of it sometimes can be a little bit of a smudgy process. Sometimes you pick up ink where you weren't really planning. So you have to be prepared for that. You can do a whole image that's trace monotype, or this could be something that you add to another monotype. I'm also going to talk a little bit, I'm going to take some ink out here, of doing what's called a blend roll, where you can use one or more colors of ink on the roller at once. So what I'm going to do is sort of put my ink out next to each other that I want to use and take the roller, and I'm just going to roll two colors on one roller. Now, the less you move your roller back and forth as you're going through your ink, the tighter you can see the blend will be. If I start moving over a little bit that way and then move back a little bit this way when I'm inking up, is you'll get more of a blend in the middle. And they can be really fun, but they can also be kind of corny or cliche. So you have to use the blend roll in the right way and the appropriate sort of what works with your imagery. But so I've moved the roller a little bit, and you can kind of see the blend is a little bit more subtle down here. So I'm just going to, so if I was inking something up, I could just kind of keep here. I'm going to do a little bit more loose rolling on the plate and going over different areas, sort of like a patchwork, just to see what this looks like when we do the trace monotype through it. So you got to be careful if you start polluting the pink too much with the purple, you know, that'll get in your roller. So I'm being a little more freeform with this, but I thought I'd show you what a blend roll looks like. Right, so you could do a little bit there. I'm going to ink up the block. I need a little bit more ink out here. Out. So obviously you can't turn your roller when you're doing a blend roll, otherwise you'll ruin the blend. So even in the way that I've inked up my plate right now, a bunch of different sort of patchy blend rolls on it. You could go with your ink. You could just print that, you know, as part of an image. But what I'm going to do with the trace monotype, and you can do this with the Japanese paper or the rag paper, is I'm going to gently sort of lay the paper on there. Okay. Now you have to be careful, because if you lean on it, you press on it, just your fingerprint will make a mark. So some people will use an arch, a wooden arch, sort of that goes over to rest their hand on. I don't have one of those. So I'm just going to start playing, drawing here the pattern on the back of the paper. So you are drawing on the paper. You could, if you want to, put down a piece of newsprint. You know, and go through that. May have to press a little bit harder, right? But let's just take a peek at what I've just done, just with that little bit. So you can see the lines have transferred. So I'm going to stop for a moment and finish just kind of doing a design on here, and then I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so we're back, and you can see I've been drawing a little bit more on the back of the paper to lift up some ink. I also tapped it, just tapping with my fingerprints, and then I also just sort of ran my fingers down like that on the paper. So let's pull this off and see what we have. All right. So you can see, depending on how I pressed against the ink slab on the plexi plates, I got some different marks. So that could be right there, trace monotype that you're done with. Or like I've said before in some of the other videos, you could then actually do another plate that had additive methods on top of this, or reductive methods, or even do another trace monotype. The fun thing also is that now on my plate, I have, the negative of what I just did. So I can print this again. So I'm going to take out a little bit of the releasing agent that I've showed you before. And like I've said in other videos, the releasing agent, I could print this right now, which again would be the ghost of my trace monotype. I could print this now just how it is, but if I put a little bit of the releasing agent over it, it just helps to loosen up the ink a little bit and can give you slightly, I think, a better impression. If you don't have the releasing agent, you can go ahead and just now print this on its own. So I'm just going to go over this. And I go over it pretty lightly with my roller. Also, at this point in the process, Monotype is so flexible. You can kind of do whatever you want. I could take Q-tips, I could take a rag, I could wipe part of this out if I wanted to emphasize something. So you can really kind of keep playing with the block. So I could take a Q-tip and do something like that. I can kind of tap it with my finger, maybe just to soften that just a little bit. You could actually right now do some additive processes on this plate by taking some paintbrushes and painting some of the ink on top of it. You could just kind of keep manipulating the plate however you wanted. I'm going to take another piece of paper and before I do that, I'm going to take a paper towel, wipe up a little bit of the ink I've got on the slab just to make it a little cleaner. I'm going to take my paper and I'm using the block to register. Oops. My paper's not quite the same size, not exactly the same size. And because of that, I'm going to take a piece of newsprint. I've got a little bit of ink there on the side. And at this point, you could sort of do another trace monotype through it. See how I'm lifting that up? You could then selectively sort of do a trace on this. I'm just going to show you printing it just to show you what the negative of the trace monotype looks like. what I'm doing here is I'm taking the etching burnisher and just seeing, even though I'm doing the ghost, I might be able to pull up a little bit more ink. We'll see if that looks any different. And then, like I said before, you could actually sort of still try to do some trace monotype in here, and we'll see what that does. Because again, this is the ghost of my first trace monotype. And you get sort of a nice negative image of what you sort of drew out. So let's see what that looks like. So it's kind of subtle, but I am getting a little bit more ink right there, but you can see where I drew before. We'll look at the first one. So just a little bit. This is the first, the trace monotype, and you can see all the lines are sort of positive color. And then this is the ghost from that. And you can see, obviously I'd taken ink off there, so they show up as white lines in a dark field. And you can see how adding extra marks down here made a little bit of a difference in terms of doing trace monotype on the back, and then how my smudgy stuff came out on the bottom. And here's where I took the Q-tip going through there on the ghost. So you can do lots of different things with trace monotype. They can be a finished print unto itself. You can do the ghost. You can add this process to other prints that you've done that use reductive or additive methods. So again, these can all be mixed up together. And I'm going to show you some artists who use trace monotype very successfully in their work. One is Jessica Mills. She was a former grad student, and Sarah Smelser. And I'll be putting both of their work up online for you all to look at. All right, so let's make some trace monotypes.